Welcome to the Creation Innovation Podcast. I'm your host, Elizabeth King. Together, we'll have conversations with incredible human beings who have taken their creative outlet and turned it into something innovative. From people leaving the corporate world to be 8-figure entrepreneurs to people who have created books, created a family, or just creating to have fun in the world. We are all in a journey to create something amazing in our lives, and I hope that you find some inspiration of your own here. This is the Creation Innovation Podcast. Hey everyone, thanks for joining us again. I am so excited today to speak with Rachel Gibler, who has many things going on, but right now as I'm looking at her, behind her it says it's fucking spiritual, which I love for so many reasons, and we'll dive into a little bit. But welcome so much, Rachel. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Elizabeth. I'm excited to chat today.
So how did you come up with that title? And is that just the title of your podcast, your business, all of the above? What?
Yeah, it started as the title of my podcast, and it really grew itself and turned into kind of this brand that people knew me for. So I guess you could call it, just my brand now.
Yeah.
But really, it was born out of the desire to create a space in the spiritual and self-development communities that I felt at home at, right? Because, I think we always create what it is that we need the most.
Yeah.
And I had been in the self-development space for a couple of years off and on. And, I had really found myself feeling like I wasn't buttoned up enough for the mindset gurus, right? And I liked to curse. And at the time I was still, drinking here and there. Actually, I don't drink anymore, but at the time that this was born. And I also was really deepening in my spirituality. But at the same time, I felt like I wasn't buttoned up enough for the mindset to be a mindset guru, right? And then I wasn't airy, fairy, light, meditating on a mountain kind of thing that we see in the spiritual community. And so I thought, where is the community for people that are showing up messy, showing up imperfect, not getting it necessarily quote unquote right or the one way it has to look, but how do we take these principles that have changed my life and make them accessible and relatable and applicable to real freaking humans, And one day I just said, sometimes it's just fucking spiritual. And then it just stuck, and I was like, oh, that's it. That's the thing.
And you love it when you get that light bulb moment of like, that's what it is. Yeah,
exactly.
And I feel like I can completely relate to that because my whole 30s, I was on this spiritual quest, and I went literally all over the world to retreats and silent retreats and meditation retreats and yoga, yada, yada, whatever. And exactly what you're saying, there's either like the hippy dippies that I didn't quite fit into. There's the people that are super religious and spiritual, which we can talk about that as well. Yeah. And then there's kind of the in between. And I never really felt like I found my people, so to speak, because I related to a lot of different areas around spirituality. And I wasn't all in any of those aspects. Yeah. I always would say like I'm a cafeteria person where like I take a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And, but I don't do, I will do the silent retreat, but I'm not doing them 18 times a year like some people do them, right? Or whatever. And so I love that you kind of pave this path for yourself and the others that are along that same path as you, because it is so unique when you're trying to figure that out too. And a lot of times people are coming from this religious path and get a little bit confused when they say, what is religion versus spirituality, which to some of us may be so obvious and such common sense. Yeah. And also I believe, I don't know about you, but a lot of times that they can live together in different ways. And I think, man, whoever you want to call it, really tends to make us think that they can't, right? Yeah. You need to like go this direction or that direction. And I'm kind of like, well, my God doesn't really believe that. And, I believe in spirit babies and all these other things. But if I'm talking to that about at somebody's church, they'd be like, oh God, like you're not allowed to be here or talk about that. So,
100%.
what is your perspective of your definition of spirituality, I guess?
Oh, I love that. So I love that you touched on all of this because I definitely agree. And that's what It's Fucking Spiritual is about, is creating your own unique path. It doesn't need to look like mine. It doesn't need to look like anybody else's, but it's about taking these principles and making them work for you. So for me, spirituality is simply a connection to the greater source,
Hmm.
a connection to it's what ties us to the greater being, the greater purpose. And whatever that looks like in whatever facet is individual to the person. But I think that it's within all of us, and it lives within all of us, and it's your connection to self and therefore your connection to source.
I love that because I think too, when you are on a spiritual path, it takes a while to realize that not everybody's on the same
Yeah.
time frame of recognizing their own spiritual path, right? And
Mm-hmm.
knowing that we all have different times, different lifetimes we've been here and different evolutions of ourselves, even on this dimension, et cetera. And to kind of open that up to accept the fact that it's okay if he or she is not at the same place that I'm at, but
Mm-hmm.
yet we can still coexist together, knowing that there's beauty in everybody's own journey and path.
Yeah.
And how do we just kind of find that spirituality together and kumbaya, so to speak, for lack of a better term, with
Yeah.
each other, even though without judgment, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
there is going to be those people that, I'll use the example again, that can meditate in silence for 80 days. That's not me. I have no desire even to want to do that. There's some people that choose not to drink or fast or whatever because that brings them closer to their higher self or God or whatever it is that they're looking for, and completely respect that. But I think there's a lot of judgment sometimes that comes from the people that are not quite there. And when
Yeah.
you're either in relationship with somebody that's that way or a friendship or whatever, how do you suggest for other people when they're starting on their spiritual path and the people that are around them are not quite there?
Mm-hmm.
They're not bad people, right? They're just not going that direction right now, and they may never. That's the other thing that
Yeah.
sometimes is hard to get your head around, like that just might not be their path in this life, right? So what do you
Yes.
suggest for people that are in those types of situations where they're just kind of like getting super into it and they're reading books and they're following podcasts and they're getting super
Yes.
psyched on it and they want to go to retreats like yours?
Yeah.
How do they navigate that?
Oh, I love that you touched on this. And it's a very important distinction. And I think it's a very important conversation that we have, because in the spiritual communities, and we can see this with very spiritual people, looking down on those that are not in that realm, right?
Right.
Or we can see that in a smaller, in your household. Maybe you are waking up to this work and you're beginning to apply it, and suddenly your partner is not, your friends are not, and you feel disconnected from them. And our first, kind of tendency that I see often, and we all do it, myself included, I've been through this as well, is that either desire to wake other people up and wanting to shake them,
Right.
right? See what I see. And if only you were on this path too, then, we would be great. But since you're
Totally.
not, kind of thing. And we can
Hmm.
disguise that as calling someone else to rise,
Right.
or just thinking that we're better than other people,
Hmm.
which can happen as well. But it's a very specific nuance where if you are caught in that trap, that is spiritual ego, and that is your human, that is not you practicing these principles. Because the true practice of these principles understands and accepts and allows other human beings to be exactly where they're at, and you see them in their perfection. And when you don't, and when you see other people as less than in their perfection, that's your work. That's
Uh-huh.
not their work. And so to answer your question, back to advice, what advice would I have? And I'm assuming we're probably mostly going to be talking to people that maybe are waking up to this work for the first time and aren't seeing their partner, their friends do that, right?
Right.
The thing that I always like to say is don't tell, compel. So when people are asleep, I don't try to wake them up. That's not my path. That's not my role. right? Shaking people. It can be frustrating, right? You can let your human ego feel frustrated, feel annoyed. That's your work to work through. But at the end of the day, compelling someone through who you are being and the way you are embodying in yourself helps to other people to reflect back to them, because again, everything is a mirror, and pave that path and being that example for what they then can do for themselves. And when you do that, then you're compelling someone right forward. And also, to your point about maybe people will never get there, right? Also accepting them for where they're at on the journey. And that doesn't always necessarily mean, and this is the scary part, that your relationship is going to stay the same.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes your relationship may change, may morph, it may fall away, and that is okay. That's a part of the path. And if you're committed to this path, then you allow whatever comes from you embodying that next level of you.
100%. And I think that was one of the hard lessons I learned in my late 20s was I was kind of holding on so tight to things, right? And then as I got older and realized that exact principle that you're referring to now is to be in the flow, the spirituality of being in that flow and letting it go and knowing that it's for the highest good of everybody involved is a really hard thing to get your head around when you think,
Yes.
oh, but we were meant to be doing this, or I was supposed to be doing that, and realizing there's a bigger picture here at play, right? And how do you step into the flow instead of resisting and just surrender to what is there for you, which when you do, so many beautiful things happen, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to the opposite. So I really love what you're doing and the way that you're articulating it for people to understand, again, who may just be starting out on this path. Because I remember, my first book that I ever read that was like, oh, okay, like I think that I want to go down this road, and it's different for everybody, right? And you recognize those times in your life and what that is. And for most people, it's generally a time where you're at a low, right? And you're
Yeah.
kind of searching for something else, and you realize there's got to be something more happening here, right? Like, what do I need to kind of fix in myself? And recognizing that you look to what else is out there, which is actually really beautiful, at least from the perspective of when I was growing up. There was no spiritual, and it was either religious and that's it.
Right.
Spiritual fell into that if you were doing that in your religion, but
Yeah.
there wasn't all these kind of like all these cool places to go now to explore your spirituality and talk about that. And the fact, well, whatever. I think it's amazing. I won't go into all of that. But I do want to also ask you, if somebody's just starting on this path, what do you recommend for them to find their spiritual tribe? Like, how do they find people that are like-minded? And I was listening to your last podcast about being from a small town, and I have a lot of friends in California. Pretty much all of my friends from California are transplants. Nobody's from here. A lot of them are from very small towns in middle America. And so they have found this spiritual path and coming out to California where there's things are more open and people are more open and things like that. But how do you suggest for somebody who maybe hasn't yet made a big move to other areas that are open to start to find their tribe of people that think the same way that they do and are interested in the same things that they are and can just geek out on all things spirituality and all the
Yeah. I love that question. And so I think it's really important to note that our brain is going to give us all of the reasons to say the same because it's predictable and it's safe. And so if you're in a small town and you find yourself and your brain going, well, there's just no one here like me. So, once I move, then I will, right? Once I get connected, one day I'll be, once my circumstances change.
And we do that all the time in all things, right?
Exactly.
Not just that, but yes, that's a great
point. Exactly. Yeah. And so if you find yourself falling into that trap, what I want to say to you is that we are, no matter where you're located, right? I hear this all the time from people in my community, like, oh, but I live in a small town, or, oh, I've grown up here my whole life. And like my friends are all the same. And they just think the same, right? That is a very, that is just your brain trying to keep you stuck because it's safe there, right? But where we really are in the world right now, we are in the age of information. So you have everything at your fingertips. A Google search, if you want to find anything out. You have social media. You can be connected to the entire world. I have clients that are all over the world. I have someone in my program right now that lives in Iceland, someone that lives in New Zealand. Like literally, we are not in close proximity to each other. So whatever you want to become a part of, immerse yourself in that, right? So you want to learn a new language. If you go to a coffee shop and you go, study Rosetta Stone once a week, how well are you going to learn that language versus if you go to Mexico and learn Spanish for 2 months and you are immersed in that culture, right? That is who's going to learn Spanish faster, right?
Yeah.
It's the same thing with spirituality, with this work, with self-development, is the more you immerse yourself in the language and immerse yourself with people that speak that same language, the faster you're going to collapse that time frame for you to be able to see those same results. And so the way to find people is do the Google search. You start to follow people that inspire you, start to flood your mind with different concepts that maybe you don't have in your immediate vicinity or your immediate community that you might live in, right? And so begin to look outside of that for different information. And what ends up happening when you do that is one post of somebody leads you to another. Then you go down the rabbit hole there. Then that leads you to something else. And for me, this was just 4 years ago, I was listening to a podcast and it was, women entrepreneurs, and I wanted to start my own business. I didn't have a business. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew I wanted to inspire people at this point, right? And I was listening to a podcast and she just happened to be hosting a women entrepreneur event that weekend out in San Diego. I live in Texas. And I decided, okay, you know what? Let me look this up. So that nudge you feel, that intuitive hit of like, this feels expansive. Maybe it feels scary, but whoa, what's this, right? Follow that. So every time you get that feeling, follow that and go down the rabbit hole. So I went down that rabbit hole and I realized, oh, it's this weekend. I bought a ticket and I bought a plane ticket. I flew out the next day. And then I ended up in a Facebook group, meeting other women that needed somebody to stay in their Airbnb because someone dropped out. Boom, I get an Airbnb. Now I'm with these women who all had online businesses. And at that event that I went to, my very first one, I put myself in a room before I felt ready to be there with people that were doing the thing that I wanted to do because I followed a nudge, seeing a post that led me to a podcast, that led me to the event. And then at that event, I was encouraged by those women to post my first Instagram post. And boom, here we are 4 years later. And now I'm hosting my own retreats, inspiring women to do the same.
Awesome. I love it. I always talk about how we can only connect the dots looking back, right? You can never plan it out the way that you just mapped out how that all connected for you, right? And
exactly.
And I think that's part of the flow again, is trusting that flow, that nudge, or whatever it is that you want to refer to that. Whereas maybe somebody's listening again who wants to start their own business. I know a lot of people are that way. A lot of people feel like, oh, they're being called back to work full time. They really want to stay at home and work, or they want more flexibility, or they want the ability to make more money, or whatever it may be. Follow that. There's a reason that your brain is going that direction, right? That it's firing that way. There's something in you that's telling you to follow that. And just like finding your tribe with anything. And you'll have many tribes, I think. I don't know about you, but I have my entrepreneurs, I have my spiritual, I have my fertility stuff. There's lots of different aspects that make up who I am and what I do. And I'm sure most people are the same. And all of those come from the same type of thing that you just said right there, right? Finding those people that you're aligned with and you're like, oh my God, she lights me up or he lights me up. And, I want to find out more about that person, dig in more and see, because maybe it's not that specific person. Maybe it's somebody who knows that person, right? And we will never know that until you start to dig. And I think as an entrepreneur, that's a really important place to start, is just start being your own private investigator of what it is that lights you up, right? Like, I just went to a reproductive medicine conference and I said to my husband, I'm like geeking out and so giddy about talking about sperm and ovulation and stuff. Like, that's crazy, right?
Yeah.
And like I said, I'm all about astrology and spirit babies and psychics and all of that's my jam. I could talk to people about that all day long. But there's also another part of me that's, very business and corporate, and I've been doing it for 25 years and can
Mhm.
talk about that all day long too. So
Yeah.
it's you don't have to define yourself as one thing and think you have to stay in that lane forever, and
Hmm.
I think that's what people often feel like it's such a big commitment. No,
Yeah.
nothing, like you can undo anything really, and you
Yeah.
can shift at any time, and that's the beauty of life and all that we do.
Yeah.
So one thing is pivoting, speaking of, I want to talk
Yes.
about creating. I talk about all day, every day about we're here to create in whatever
Hmm.
way that is. Some people it's creating a baby, some people it's a business, a book, a whatever. So for you, you've created this brand.
Yeah.
So if you can tell us what is under this umbrella of your brand and how that came about, because stepping out in that as a young woman, that's a pretty big, like, ballsy move to be like, I'm going to go, start my own business and I'm going to make a shit ton of money. And look at
Yeah.
what I actually did it, and I think
Yeah.
people don't expect that of us too much. And then when they do, they're like, oh, that actually happened. She actually did that. It's like, yeah, I
Mm.
did.
Yeah.
So let's hear your
Yeah.
story in that and what you created and how you went about doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, now my whole brand is It's Fucking Spiritual, which is this brand is growing rapidly and faster than I now it is creating itself. And that's what happens when you are in alignment, is that people are now asking for things and then I am creating it
Right.
because I am in alignment, right?
Hmm.
But as far as my business goes, right, I have my podcast, which is my free resource. I have 2 podcasts per week that I drop and have a huge community. I'm a community builder first and foremost. So that is a
Hmm.
really, really large strength of mine. I have group programs and group coaching programs where I take people through 12-week process of how to up level their life, how to start the work from start to finish. And we've got modules and things like that, right? I've got my high level one-on-one coaching where I do spiritual and business coaching as well. And now I'm moving into the retreat space because I'm being asked so often for people wanting to do this stuff in person. And that is where I
Hmm.
really think we're going to begin shining out in 2023.
Totally.
But it really started, it wasn't something that I was able to fully see the trajectory of when I first started. It started with a nudge, and following that, I actually owned brick and mortar businesses before I did
Oh,
this.
okay.
And I just sold those. I haven't even really announced that, but I did just sell those a few months back because of how fast my online brand business has grown, and just from the sheer time and things like that that I needed to put in, and my purpose I felt was here. But
Yeah.
before that, I was working in corporate, didn't want to do corporate, realized I wanted to work for myself, didn't feel comfortable or confident enough to start my own brand at that point. So I ended up going in on some brick and mortar salons, opened 2 of those, and it naturally ended up just kind of evolving because I started to document. Back to that retreat that I went to, I started to document on Instagram my journey from corporate to entrepreneurship,
Okay.
and it naturally began to evolve. And so I started to put myself in the rooms, put myself in business programs, learn how online business work, learn how to create, if we're talking from a business side, funnels, things like that, how to, from a logistical standpoint. And at the same time, doing a ton of inner work on myself to get to the point of, I only launched It's Fucking Spiritual 16 months ago. And the second I launched it, it blew up because of how in alignment I was, where basically I did not just do the first thing. I followed the nudge. I followed what lit me up. I learned something about it, but I didn't go all in on something until I knew, oh, this is from beyond me. Talk about
Hmm.
co-creating, right?
Yeah,
It wasn't a forced thing. It was the world needs this. And then
totally.
that's when I began the podcast. And then the
Hmm.
podcast turned into the group programs, the coaching, now the retreats. And then we'll be growing probably into a membership model. A ton of different stuff is going to be coming under that umbrella. So it'll be great.
Awesome. I
Yeah.
love that. That's similar of how, from my perspective too, with the fertility. Like I never in a million years would have thought I was going to be doing fertility after my life prior to that. But I do feel this is my life's mission to help
Mm,
educate women and men in this space. So I
I
completely
love
get
that.
that. And once that's in alignment, I mean, I could talk to the wall about fertility all day long. And if anyone else wants to come along, great. And if not, I'll keep talking.
Right.
It's just, I love it so much. And I think when you find where you land, and your heart expands. You mentioned the expansion and contraction earlier in something you said. I think really paying attention to that, of recognizing in your own body, is my body contracting in this? Okay, then it's
Mhm.
probably not meant for me to be going this direction. Or do I
Yes.
feel the expansion? Okay, let me step into that, even though it might be a little scary. And getting that perspective of, is it just scary because it's unknown, right?
Right.
Or is it really a contraction for you? Because there's a
Yeah.
difference, that because a lot of times people think, oh, it's too scary, I'm going to turn around and run away,
Mhm.
when really it's just the unknown. But
Yeah.
you do want to expand there. It's that excitement at the
Mhm.
same time that you mentioned too, right? Like,
Yeah.
so I love that you have kind of stepped into this amazing space that has unfolded for you and
Yes.
in front of you, and you're just kind of following the path that it's leading, which I think is so cool. Because it, a lot of times people think that it's has to either be so hard and so much work. Granted, it's not easy.
Mhm.
It takes a lot of time and a lot of things, like you were just saying, the click
Yeah.
funnels and all the stuff.
Yeah.
But when you're loving what you do, it's all it it all, again, I hate to go back to the word flow, but it all does feel like that, right? It
It
all
does.
feels like for the greater good of your higher self and
Mhm.
those that you're serving around you. I don't know if you feel that way, but I really feel like there's a purpose for me to be doing
Yes.
this.
Yeah.
So, how can
100%.
how can people find out about your programs and your retreat? Can you tell us a little bit more though about the retreat too? I'm the biggest
Yes.
fan of in-person everything. I think there you cannot get enough of that, and your transformations that happen when you're in person versus, a Zoom session or whatever, a
It's
hundred times.
unmatched. It
Yeah,
is unmatched. It is being in person and facilitating in person and receiving those the breakthroughs and things like that, connecting with other people. I have met some of my best friends in the world, business partners, people that have helped me on my business. I just went to a retreat, and now the person that was putting on that retreat, who is huge in this space, is now going to be my one-on-one mentor because of how we connected to that retreat. So
yeah.
one thing leads to another, which is so cool. And so my retreat's going to be 4 days in Austin. So everyone's hearing it here first. I have not even announced.
Yay.
So you guys listening to this are lucky. I haven't announced where it is yet, but it will be in April in Austin. It's going to be
Beautiful.
a 4-day retreat, and there's going to be it's an all women retreat for this
Okay.
iteration, about 15 people, so that everyone, I want to be really diving deep with each person. There's going to be a lot of different yoga, meditation, breath work, doing the work together, a lot of different healing exercises, and feeling like a goddess is going to be the main theme of it, and pampering and really
Awesome.
treating yourself and stepping into the highest version of you. And that's what we're going to be practicing and embodying those
Cool.
4 days. So it's going to
And
be
can
really, really
anybody
fun.
do this? Is it for, anyone on their level of
Yes.
spirituality, so to speak, right? That we were talking about
Yes.
earlier? Or is
Yeah.
it someone who's already kind of evolved and through the process?
I believe that if you are feeling called, then you are meant to be there,
I
right? And
agree.
so
Yeah.
there's no specific, you have to be at this level or that level. And I think that when we get into that, right, there's a time and a place for that. But in terms of our own spiritual evolution, and in terms of tapping into our highest self, we all have access to that. We all have the ability to do that. And so there are no levels in that. It's, do you want to come? Do you want to come connect? Do you want to come learn, grow? And whatever it is that you are meant to get through that weekend, and this is for anything, my retreat or
Yeah.
anybody else's, you get exactly what it is that you need, and the healing and the upgrades, right, the energetic
Yeah.
upgrades that you receive are exactly what you are meant to receive, because of how something hits you in that specific way in that specific time. So I believe,
Yeah.
anybody is welcome at this retreat. Women identifying are welcome to come. So I'll give you a wait list that they can check it out, and
Awesome.
everyone can check me out too at Rachel Gibler, RachelGibler on Instagram, TikTok, all of things, my website. So there's all different ways to connect with me. Definitely shoot me a DM if you have any questions or comments about even the podcast or takeaways. I would love to hear them.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for being here and our quick chat, and good luck with your retreat. I can't wait to hear all about it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on. This was such a joy to chat with you, and we'll talk soon.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Creation Innovation Podcast. Make sure to follow us on Spotify for free episodes and subscribe to the Creation Innovation Podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you choose to get your podcast. Don't forget to rate and review the podcast wherever you're listening for a chance to receive a special gift. Yes, we actually do send out gifts. It's my favorite thing to do. So visit us at elizabethking.com/creation innovation for more information on how to enter. Every review counts, and we are so grateful. You can follow me at the official Elizabeth King on Instagram or TikTok. Until next time.